Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. There's a lot of talk about renewable energy these days. The discussions and debates tend to center around alternatives like solar power and wind power, or on renewable biomass energies like wood and seed oils. But it's often said that one of the things that grows best in Vermont is grass. So why not use grass as renewable biomass energy? Well, in fact, an agronomist at the University of Vermont is trying to do just that. His research is being conducted around the state, as we learn in this report from Across the Fence's Rebecca Gollin.
A field of grass in Vermont is generally not something to talk about. But this is no ordinary field of grass, and it does have a story to tell.
These grasses can last 20, 30 years if they're in the right, soil and environment.
SID Bosworth is an agronomist at the University of Vermont who specializes in field and forage crops. With a focus on forage nutrition and management, Bosworth's work ranges from research in the field to educational programs for students, farmers, and land managers, which are also in the field most of the time.
Do you have any miscanthus, Jerry?
For several years, Bosworth has been researching how well grasses grow in Vermont in several plots around the state.
We're looking at it on 3 different soil types to see how well they're adapted. And this one looks very promising. It's a very beautiful plant. You can see the seed head gets quite tall.
This research is not about growing plants that look nice, although some, like switchgrass and miscanthus, are common in Vermont as ornamentals. But what Bosworth is hoping to do with all this grass is burn it.
These grasses have to be densified to effectively burn. And one of the methods, and probably the most common, would be to make pellets like this.
Research on alternative biomass sources is not a new idea. 60% of the fuel used in Vermont's homes and businesses is number 2 heating oil, which is petroleum-based and subject to price fluctuation. A number of crops, such as sunflower and canola, are already used as alternatives to oil in Vermont, and just as many more are being grown and studied.
My objective in this research is to evaluate different varieties and see how well they're adapted to Vermont for both persistence under different soil types, diseases, yield, and also combustion quality characteristics, which is our ultimate goal for the biomass crop.
In Vermont, wood is the primary alternative biomass, but based on work that's already been done elsewhere and Bosworth's own observations, these grasses have a lot of potential. They can be grown on unused or marginal land and require little maintenance once they're established. Bosworth is working with non-invasive and sterile varieties, and he's finding that some of the grasses are even more suited to Vermont's unique soil than he had hoped.
They're perennials, so they form a sod, so they protect the soil from erosion. They're good at water infiltration, so they protect against runoff. So there can be water quality improvement. Since they're not harvested until the fall, there's opportunities for wildlife to nest within the grasses, and actually something like grassland birds could nest and successfully fledge. There's very low input in terms of fertilizer and pesticides and that sort of thing. Once these grasses are established, there really is minimal inputs compared to the output that you can get from them.
To get the most information from the study, Bosworth is testing a variety of species at several sites around the state. The different locations will give a sense of how the plants will grow in Vermont's diverse soil.
Our soils in Vermont can vary quite a bit, even in the same field.
We know the soil, the growing conditions, the weather, the way the crop is harvested, the way it's processed, and what is in the makeup of the type of, in this case, grass that we're using.
Christopher Davis manages Meach Cove Farm in Shelburne, where the owners wanted a crop they could grow to replace some of the heating oil used on the farm.
We've already done the obvious things with Efficiency Vermont, more insulation, weather stripping, new windows on a number of the buildings. We needed the next step.
The test plots that Bosworth put in here several years ago are reaching maturity and the full potential of their production ability. Davis helps maintain the plots, and when they are mature, he will pelletize the grass and do burn studies over the winter.
The hope is we're going to be able to save a lot of time and effort for anybody else going forward who wants to be putting a grass crop that they could grow on their property into a heating unit. So we hope we're going to take a lot of the guesswork out of that.
So far, the research has been promising, showing which varieties grow well in wetter or drier soils and under other conditions, and which don't. One answer for Vermont could be to focus on a mix of grasses that will provide a variety of benefits.
This is a plot of switchgrass. The variety is Caven Rock, with big blue stem. The variety is Prairie View. It's very hard to establish this grass, so it might be risky to plant it alone, where the switchgrass is a little more successful. And it has attributes such as the carbon sequestration. So I think together they could make a nice blend.
Although this research is a start, many questions remain about how and where and what kind of grasses to grow, and how much biomass they'll yield, and how well they'll pelletize and burn. There are still a lot of questions. SID Bosworth plans to answer them all. In Shelburne, I'm Rebecca Gullen with Across the Fence.
Well, thanks, Rebecca. The UVM Extension researcher featured in Rebecca's story joins me now in the studio. It's a pleasure to welcome SID Bosworth. Thanks a lot for being with us. Yeah, that's a big, tall order.
That is a big, tall order.
So how long have you been doing this, and who are some of the partners that you've worked with?
Thanks, Judy. Well, I think it's been about 5 or 6 years since I've been involved in this grass energy type effort. Most of my work in the past has been with pasture management and forage crops, and I still work in those areas. First, the state provided a little funding, and I worked with some farmers in just establishing some switchgrass about 5, 6 years ago. One of those stands up in Alburg at Borderview Farm, we're still using for some research on that. It's a very small stand. I was fortunate to work with some excellent partners in the state over the last 4 to 5 years. The Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund both has been a partner and a support for this project through the support of Senator Leahy's office. We've been able to get some funding to do this research. The Biomass Energy Resource Center, it's a nonprofit organization, has been very involved in this partnership, providing some of the engineering expertise. And Vermont Technical College, we have some projects going together, looking at some of the grasses and how they might pelletize. So that's pretty exciting, along with my excellent farm and landowner collaborators, Lincoln Farm in East Randolph, Borderview up in Alburg, and Meach Cove Farm in Shelburne.
Now, this is ongoing research because, as we learned in the piece, it takes some of these grasses years to really establish and mature so that they can be used for some of the things that you're testing them for. What are you finding so far?
Okay. Well, first, it takes, some of these grasses take about 3 years to reach full yield potential. But we were actually fortunate in this trial on the screen right now that we established, we planted in June and actually took a harvest off some of those crops that first year. But they are slower to get established, and so for most cases, you're not going to get a harvest till the second year, and then it might be the third and fourth year when you're reaching, maximum potential. We've learned a lot. Some of the varieties that we planted are not doing well. Others are doing very well in the different soils that we're growing these in. I was pleasantly surprised with one of the big blue stem varieties. It's been showing some excellent results. So I think we're ready now to make some recommendations of what looks good here if farmers and other landowners are interested in planting some of these grasses.
What are the advantages of grasses as opposed to, say, wood?
Okay, and that's always a good question. We are primarily a forested ecosystem here in Vermont. We still have a lot of open land. We're an agricultural state. There's a lot of marginal land that could potentially be utilized if we want to keep it open. These crops for biomass are harvested once a year, so it might help keep that land open and optional for other uses as well for livestock farmers.
Are you able to say how soon this technology might be available and used in Vermont?
So there's some challenges in this technology, but actually most of the technology's here. We can make hay. Our farmers, and that's an advantage. It's really a hay system. Our farmers have the knowledge and the hay equipment for the growing and harvesting. There's actually a company that has started based out of Bennington that is contracting with landowners around the Northeast, not just in Vermont, but around the Northeast, and they're trying to set up contracts with things like hospitals and churches and institutions. They're going for not homeowners, but setting up systems that can burn these grasses with bigger boilers that can handle this kind of material. So it's actually starting in a slow way, and my feeling is, you crawl before you walk or run, and that's where we've been.
Right, and a lot, we saw in the package there, a lot of the farms, the farm that we saw is actually being a pioneer in this respect, as far as being the one to go ahead and grow the stuff, see what grows best, how to pelletize it, what pellets work best, what doesn't work with it. Right,
so we're trying these on-farm, I don't know if you want to call them demonstrations or scenarios, and we're trying to document all the different aspects of that. Where's the constraints? What's the estimated costs to harvest? You have to grind this grass and then run it through a pellet mill or some other form of densification. And so we're trying to work out those numbers.
So we don't know quite yet if it's going to be economical for farmers, or how much grass would have to grow and process to make it economical?
Well, first, it's not going to be a high-end crop, for economically. I don't think it'll ever compete with, on good land, it would never compete with crops for grain or even hay crops. I think a farmer could make a lot more money off of that. So it really is more for less than ideal sites as far agronomically. And so I think at the least, if we can get the yields, and my estimate is if we can get 5 tons or more per year, then at least it can break even and might be supplemental for landowners, might help pay the property taxes, or for a farmer it might be supplemental, or another way to spread their manure, another source of land for their nutrient management program.
Or heat their home for a year.
At the same time, yes, providing this commodity for heating either their business or farm or barn, or going into a commodity stream, which isn't there yet.
Right. So how can people get more information about the work that you're doing, or if they're interested, maybe finding out if their land would be suitable?
Yes. Well, I have a website that I maintain. It's on the Plant and Soil Science UVM website. The URL is showing now, and on there are links to other sites as well. There's some research going on at Cornell. The Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund has a lot of excellent information on their website as well, and so does the BERC, or the Biomass Energy Resource Center.
Do you have to be worried about invasives?
I'm trying to look at grasses that are considered non-invasive in my study. The only grass I've been evaluating that some ecologists consider potentially or is invasive in wetland areas is one that we already have here, reed canary grass. It has such a potential for biomass, I had to at least look at it. So I do have that one in my studies, but mainly because it's already growing in our marginal lands.
What do you look for in a grass that makes it so attractive to you for this project?
Well, we have 2 kinds of grasses, a cool season grass, and that's the ones we typically grow here for our hay crops and our pasture. And we're looking for harvesting after it's mature, when it's headed out. And those grasses are usually ready in late July, early August. So we're looking for high yield, some of the grasses that would fit that. These warm season grasses like switchgrass, many people have heard of switchgrass, it was on the tape.
Right.
Those take longer to mature. They start heading out in midsummer, and they really are more suited for harvesting in the fall. So that's another factor, is what's our risks of getting these successfully harvested considering our weather conditions.
Well, we touched briefly on turning the grass into pellets, but there's a whole nother story about your research in pelletization, and so you've agreed to come back with us tomorrow to explore some of those aspects. And that's our program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. We'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.
For a video copy of today's program, call toll-free 1-888-ATF-3430. Across the Fence is brought to you as a public service by University of Vermont Extension and WCAX-TV.